What do you then see if we look more further, like what would the future hold up for the BIM? Like there has been a lot of talk about the BIM hubs and even BIM blockchains and a lot of different things.
Yeah, I've been reading about that lately. It's an interesting topic. I think web is definitely the future. I mean, we look at things like Google and Apple and those sort of companies, and everything eventually goes to the web. And I think BIM 360 and those platforms are showing us that that is the direction that the big players in the market are moving. So I think eventually we'll get to a point, and I was talking to someone else the other day about this on another podcast, that eventually we expect that probably the software won't be hosted on the hardware anymore. It'll be hosted on the web. And then the way that we all work will change quite a lot. Like we won't need to carry around these giant laptops everywhere. We'll just need to have a good internet speed, essentially. And I think the software is going to change too. I think things like Open BIM and IFC and those sort of movements have forced companies to get a little bit more collaborative with how they work together, because their file formats are no longer being accepted by the industry. And now they're expecting open data standards. And I think that's going to put a lot of pressure on the major players in the industry, especially AUTODESK, because they're still quite isolated in terms of how they work. But I think add 5 or 10 years on, and I'd be pretty amazed if they haven't been forced to, put in consistent IFC standards for exporting data out of Revit and accepting data into Revit. So and other programs too. Like I know ArchiCAD's quite far ahead when it comes to that. They've done quite a lot of good work with the Nemenchek group. So I think eventually all the players will have to sort of join the same party, hopefully. And I think the web will probably be where it all happens.
Yeah, I think the Rhinoceros has quite a good challenger for Autodesk at the moment. And for the smaller players like Trimble, Leica, Topcon, it's already seen that they have lost their market potential because they have had this one ecosystem mindset that, hey, all the people connect with our products and they work inside our portfolio. Yeah. But now when they're losing it with open standards, then they start finding the open data platforms.
Yeah, so I think that's probably where we'll go. Like I know a few companies that are working on like translation programs that can get non-compatible programs to work together.
Oh wow!
There's sort of certain web add-ins that people are trying to put on top of Aconex and platforms like that, such as BIM Launcher, that are trying to get the programs to talk together, even if the companies don't want to make their file formats work with each other. So there is some pressure on them too, that even if they don't do it, someone else is going to.
Yeah, yeah, true.
All about market share, and people might start threatening each other's share of the market. So I think there'll be some pretty big power plays in the next 5-10 years, and we're probably already seeing a few pretty big power plays in the background. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it all changes. I think we'll probably all still be using the big platforms in like 5 years, but 10 years, not sure. Yeah, hard to say.
Yeah, it will be. I think like the last couple of years, at least in Finland, has been like really, really active compared to the way before. And then each year it just like increases the changes and happenings, and it's like the reorganization of everything is happening. I think it's really interesting times.
It is funny though, because I noticed that the range of quality across companies is getting wider. So like some companies are just shooting way ahead and other companies are falling behind. So I do wonder whether we're going to reach a point where certain companies just won't have the clients to work with anymore, or if it's just or if the quality is just going to keep getting wider and wider as we get further and further into progress. But it'll be interesting to see sort of at what point the market can't sustain itself once it doesn't adopt technology to the right degree.
Yeah,
I think I've seen quite a lot of companies that they're not adopting the way that they need to, or they might not be aware of international standards that are about to become relevant. I do wonder like the types of companies that will be around in say 10 years that deal with just architecture. Like maybe they might have to expand into like construction as well, or they might have to become like a generative design specialist studio or something like that. That they might need to find niches if they don't catch up, I guess.
Yeah, and I think it's something that will really, some will go bankrupt and some will go much bigger. I think it's like what I have seen, it's in Finland, most of the projects that we have, we use machine guidance systems that they will need BIM models to utilize. And I mean, it has been like you anymore. It's really hard to win a project if you don't have and don't utilize BIM in construction. And I think that's something like a big change that you either adopt and learn to implement it in your projects, or then, well, then you
Yeah, and
need
I
to
think
find
that's the
another
way it should
business.
be, really. I mean, if you don't keep up, you don't keep up. I mean, that was one of the reasons I became a consultant, is I could sort of see that there was just so much difference in quality in the market, and I sort of wanted to sort of step to the side for a while and just work with lots of different types of people rather than just one company. And I think I also wanted to just sort of stand back and, learn some more skills on my own. And then, once the market's caught up again, like sort of reassess, like, how I can help them again. So, and it's been good. I've seen a lot of different sort of clients and a wide range of needs, and some of them are really far ahead, and other ones are just building their first template. So there's a really wide spectrum still of what's available. But it's a very positive time for BIM. I've noticed that everyone that's coming to me is like, they're very positive about it, which is great. Whereas, like I said, like 5-10 years ago, it wouldn't have been the same. So yeah, it's an interesting time to be in the market.
Yeah, definitely. Out of curiosity, when you spoke about companies, no need to any details share, but on the like general spectrum, have you seen a lot of companies? Was it an architecture or design or construction to start developing their own softwares to automate the processes and workflows?
Yeah. I mean, one company that I'm happy to name because it's a positive thing. I used to work at a company called HDR, who are one of the largest firms in the world, and I worked in their Sydney office, and they're actually developing their own software, and they sort of share it from time to time on their social feeds, and it's essentially data-driven design tools. So they've done some really great work with that since I finished up there, and I also worked at Woods Bagot, and they have quite a well-known system there. I think they've been trialing it in New York, where they essentially have a full city model that they use to find viable sites for development. So there are some pretty interesting third-party sort of efforts that some of these firms are making. At the same time, too, some of them don't build software; they use it instead. So, like a couple of other companies I've worked at focused more on being in touch with the right people rather than in-housing their development. So they sort of had like sort of attaché companies that they could work with from time to time, and then they could sort of help the development of that company's tools, but then use them in turn. So there's been some interesting arrangements that I've seen, and I think software's always, worth being aware of, like when it's, not available to the full market, because obviously that's where you get a competitive advantage. Whereas if you just use the same program as the guys next door, then, there's not as much competitive advantage in what you can do. It's more about how you design rather than the tools used to do it in that case.
Yeah, and I think the general dilemma with the softwares is that when we have been like really skill and experience focused industry, that the experience has been like the top of the cake. But now then comes the problem that if that experienced guy now switches to another company, all the skills and workflows and processes go to there, and then people have been starting to like thinking like, hey, well, if we start creating our own IP, like algorithmic modelings and softwares, then that is something that no one can steal. That's our competitive advantage.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Having moved companies about 4 times in my career, I know what you mean. we do take IP just in our heads with us, like not to use it again, but they do lose a degree of what that all was and how it was set up, which you're right, is why it's really important that companies do foster and maintain what's developed for them. I think a lot of companies are really just starting to realize that you can save a lot of time using even things like Dynamo. So to have like a user group inside your company that knows how this all works is like, it's essential now. But I know some companies still have like one person that uses Dynamo, and if that person doesn't gets hit by a bus tomorrow, like Dynamo's just gone in their company. So it's like, it's a real risk the way some people operate. And I think that having the user group in the company is like really the successful model. I've noticed some companies are developing that. They've got like a computational group inside the company that they focus on. Like HDR, I know they've got a pretty strong computational group, for example. And I think that is like the business model of the future, having like a specialist core that can support the more abstract needs of the company. But to have it just on one person's shoulders or 2 people's shoulders, you're right, it's a big risk, especially if it's like a third-party tool that you don't control, but all the content that's built for it is what the person knows, because they can naturally just go somewhere else and build it again. Whereas if it's like a third-party tool developed in-house, it's pretty hard for that person to legally just go and take it with them. Whereas if you take a concept with you, it's not hard to rebuild it. But to go and rebuild a proprietary platform, it's just, legally, it's obviously a huge risk for the person, but at the same time, it's a lot of effort to replicate as well.
Yeah, definitely.